Well, good morning, everybody. Great to see you. As you can see, we've been having way too much fun with this whole Shark Week thing. Yesterday, we did filmed a video for one of the messages in August, and the only thing I can tell you about it is it involved water, and it involved me treading water for like an hour, and my shoulders are killing me today. So they kind of tortured me there, I think. So it'll be worth it, though. You want to check that out. We've been talking about this series, this idea that we do live in a world that's full of temptation. We do live in a world where, in a sense, we are dealing with sharks on a constant basis. We have struggles. We have hard things, hard realities. And hopefully through this series, we've been talking about and seeking what is that God has for us, what's the life He designed us for, and how do we live, in a sense, the life that He created us for, and deal with those sharks, get past those sharks, and have that life that He has for us. Do you guys know what major event happened in 1977? Jaws came out. Very good. You guessed it. Jaws came out in 1977. I remember that very specifically because I was on the swim team that summer, and we had to go to practice like 6 o'clock in the morning, and it was kind of dark, and the pool was kind of murky, and I was absolutely convinced that there was a shark in the pool. Now, this is Colorado, okay? This is as far away from the ocean as you can get, pretty much, right? But I swear I was convinced. Every time I went to get in that water in the morning, I had all of this anxiety that there was a shark in the pool. I would love to go back and erase that movie from my mind. I wish I could. Maybe I'm not the only one. Some of you might feel that way. Sometimes our anxiety is based on real things, sometimes imagined.
Becky, you can't make me do this. This is too much.
Honey, it's going to be okay. You are a man. I believe in you.
Ma'am, is he all right? Does he need my assistance?
You have no idea what this is like for me. You don't know what pain is.
Come on, hon. You've got to step up. Now is your time. I know you have it in you. You can do it. Okay, seriously, Eddie. You have to do this. And really, I don't know what pain is. Tell it to our 3 kids.
You can't make me do this. No one understands. Just leave me in peace.
That make you sure that Promised Land is in good hands, right? When I was in college, growing up, I was always interested in scuba diving. You watch Jacques Cousteau on Sunday nights, and I get all excited about this. So I got to college, and I'm putting through the course catalog. Lo and behold, they had a PE class scuba certification. And I was like, sweet, I am so taken. I can get an A in that class. This is going to help my GPA, right? So I signed up for that class, and you go into the situation, and of course, what you don't realize is how incredibly foreign it is to breathe underwater. How really weird it feels. It's like, it's obviously a whole new environment. Everything's different. Balance is different. Breathing is different. And you go through this whole process. And of course, the great thing is that they have this dive master there, the dive master who's certified to train people. And they're with you. They're there. They're walking through the process. They're teaching you the pieces and the parts of the whole thing. One of the interesting little trivia pieces about scuba diving is that pretty much the universal sign around the world for okay is this, right? But in scuba diving, that means let's go up. And what you learn is that when you get in the water and everything's okay, what the dive master wants is for you to look at them and say this means I'm okay. Now, when I was in sports, that meant, Coach, I'm tired, take me out, right? But in scuba diving, it means I'm okay, everything's fine. I'm under control. I'm not panicking. I'm not anxious. I'm breathing. My stuff's working. Everything is okay. Now, we're talking about anxiety today. People don't like the word anxiety or anxious, do we? We have better buzzwords than that. We try stressed out, worry, because those don't sound quite so, weird. We don't like anxiety. Now, of course, when it comes to anxiety, Anxiety can be imagined and anxiety can be real. So how do we deal with feelings when we have things in our world that can potentially hurt us? When we have things in our world that overwhelm us, when we have things in our world that in the long run we know are going to draw us away from God. See, here we are this morning, and let's just find out if this whole topic even applies to us, okay? Let me just ask you, by a raise of hands, is there anybody here who could say you have absolutely no worries, nothing in this world that you're unsettled about? No, really? Wow, I guess you guys came to the right place today, right? We're all in this boat together. Part of life is the reality that we do have some proverbial sharks swimming around us, don't we? Sometimes it's just something that we let our mind perseverate on too long, like I had when Jaws came out and I was sure there was a shark in the pool. But sometimes they're real. Sometimes they're swimming around us all the time. Here's a little piece of that, though. Sometimes a little bit of fear is a good thing, right? Sometimes a little fear is a good thing. It's a safety thing. It's a heightened sense of awareness in a potentially dangerous situation. Or maybe it's just that unsettled feeling when we're doing something that we just know we shouldn't do, that we know deep down is just going to take us in a direction we shouldn't go. But sometimes, ultimately, anxiety gets the best of us. And what happens is when anxiety begins to get the best of us is that it sidelines us. It takes us out of the game and pulls us away again from that life that God created us for. God knows us. He made us. He knows that we struggle. He knows we struggle with worry. He knows we struggle with anxiety. God cares about every detail of our life. But look what he has to say about this. Look at Philippians 4:6. If you would, it's in your notes. You want to pull those out? These will also come up on the side screens. Philippians 4:6. Do not be what? About, but in every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to who? He's ultimately saying, guys, it's not going to be done in perfection. We're really not going to live our lives without any worry, without any stressors, without anything to deal with, okay? A little bit of fear, again, sometimes can be a good thing. But it's saying, when that begins to trail off towards anxiety, when it begins to spin out of control, ultimately saying, that is not the direction that I created you for. The idea is this, that in the relationship with Jesus, we can be aware of the sharks that are swimming around us because they're real. We can be aware of the things in this world that will pull us towards anxiety and away from God. We can be aware of the darkness around us. We can be aware of the darkness in us. But then also to be aware that we have a place to go. We have a place to go with those feelings. We have a place to go with those needs. We have a place to go with those concerns. We can choose God's best for us instead. We can pray about those things instead of stressing about and worrying about those things. We can bring those things to God and know that he cares about every detail. I would love so much for all of us to be able to just say, you know what, let's just stop. All anxiety, all worry, all stress, let's just stop. But you can't do that, right? If you think about it, we're living with some real stuff, aren't we? You think about the last couple of weeks of the fire season around here. Whether I could stand in my front yard when Crow Peak was really burning, I could watch the flames at night. That's a little freaky. Some of you, over on the Wyoming side, you're dealing with the Carra Creek thing and now the Brownsville thing, and they had to, I understand, evacuate the Sundance Canyon neighborhood. Maybe that might be you. That might be affecting you. That's real, isn't it? That's real stuff. One of the things that I just love about the Bible, and one of the reasons that I believe in it completely, is that it is filled with imperfect people, just like me. You too? I don't know if you relate to that or not. Just like me. And you walk through the history of what happened in the lives of so many of these people. And you see these imperfect people who were able to find power, who were able to find confidence, who were able to do what God ultimately was calling them to do. God gave them the power. God gave them the love. God gave them the self-control. They were able to move forward in this world even while the sharks were attempting to pull them down. If you are a follower of Jesus, if you have made that decision, let me tell you about your spiritual family. God said to a man named Moses, most of us, we know Moses, right? Do you know that Moses was absolutely and completely filled with anxiety? Absolute, complete anxiety. He was completely convinced that he was not the guy that could do what God was asking him to do. Moses. Here's all I want you to do. I just want you to confront Pharaoh, the most powerful man on the planet, and I want you to demand that he let my people go. Oh, and don't be afraid. But what happened? Moses confronted, God delivered. And over and over again in the history of people who have walked with God, they take their fears, they take their worries, and they take these things and they trust God. They trust in His plans and they see His plans then come to fruition. But so often it's not an easy road, is it? But it's so important for us to remember that ultimately, guys, we follow Jesus. Jesus modeled what? Peace, not timidity. Jesus had every reason to fear. He had some great white sharks swimming around him. But he did not face those situations with a spirit of timidity. That is our spiritual family. And it is that same spirit that God is pouring out on you and I. And so when you're worried about something, when you're anxious about something, look at Jesus. He's very specific about it. Jesus said this to his friends. Look at John 16:33. Jesus said, I have told you these things so that in who? In me you may have what? I would circle that word. I need that. I think we all do. In this world you will have... Oh, you guys weren't very excited about that one. But take heart. I have overcome the... And we read that and we think, okay, what does that mean? It's so important to understand that the peace of Jesus is so much more. It's so much more than just a self-help technique for managing stress. It's so much more than praying that all of our problems will go away so we'll have a problem-free life. The peace of Jesus is this settled conviction in our hearts that goes right down to the core of our being, the trusting that even though God doesn't promise an easy life, He promises the best life. And that we are not accidents, and that He created us for a purpose, and He has a purpose and a plan for your life. And in that life is power from Him. In that life is help from Him. The peace of God comes from a conviction that all things, guys, including your life, are in God's hands. And His hands are strong. And one day, the Bible is very clear about this. You know, I know if you're a justice person, you think, yeah, there's just so much injustice in this world. Yes, there is. One day, the Bible is clear. All things will be made right. And in the knowledge of that, today, in my spirit, in your spirit, we can trust that all things ultimately are in the hands of God, no matter how they turn out. This week, the last few weeks in my world, they have been filled with anxiety for a few reasons, but mainly, as some of you know, my father has bone cancer, and so he's been going through chemo now for like a year and a half, and his numbers have been really good. And I won't give you all the gory details, but the unfortunate thing is the side effect of one of the chemo drugs that were given him is he had a lot of his lower jaw ultimately the bone died, is the best way you can put it. And the surgeon in Rapid said, I can't touch that. You got to have that whole thing reconstructed and plates and bone grafts. And he's 87 years old. He said, you got to go to Mayo. And so last weekend we were able to get the family together in Colorado and see all the grandkids. And then Monday morning I carried his suitcase to his car. And my brother and they headed to Mayo. And we're all sitting there quite anxious, and they get down there and they do some new scans, and lo and behold, miraculously, the doctor says, oh, it's not nearly as bad. You know, it's mostly just on the outside, and I can take care of that in like an hour. And Friday night, he was sitting at my table having dinner. Miraculous. But you know what? Christina and I had a lot of conversations Thursday and Friday. And we had to get real honest and say, did we really trust God? Did we? Were we trusting God? Were we focusing on Him? Or were we focusing on the doctors and the surgery and the cancer? Or was the reality of no matter how that turned out, good or bad, that ultimately God, yes, He is in control? And do I trust that? At the deepest level of my heart. So I understand anxiety. I understand the temptation to worry. Now, I want to give a very important caveat at this point, and it's simply this, guys, everybody worries. We do. Here's the thing, though. Some of you don't just worry occasionally. Some of you are champion worriers. Some of you are competitive worriers, right? You're the type that if at some moment in your life you find yourself not worrying about something, you start worrying about what you should be worried about, right? And you know who you are. And the sad part is that a message like this could do more harm for you than good. Because you're sitting there going, man, I knew I should be worried about stuff, and my faith just isn't nearly as deep as it should be. And then you worry about how much you should worry. Here's an important truth, guys. Many of us have anxiety about things that will never come to pass. It's true. Like sharks in a freshwater pool in Colorado. 500 years ago, there was a French philosopher, and he said this, my life has been filled with terrible misfortune, most of which never happened. And do you know that there's studies that prove it? There actually has been studies to prove it. In one study, people were asked to write down their worries over an extended period of time, and then they were supposed to identify which of those issues did not actually happen. Anybody want to guess what the percentage of things is that we worry about that actually never happen? 85%. 85% of the things that we worry about, stress about, cry about, spend energy on, emotional energy, spiritual energy on, never even happen. But yes, some things do, okay? There's still that 15%. I want to talk about, for a few minutes here, some of the ways that we can swim out into the water of life. Because God has called us to be part of this world, to do something for Him, to swim in those waters. But how do we do that? How do we go out to where the sharks live? But how do we do it under God's power? And how do we not get overly anxious about it? And I put this in your notes if you want to follow along. Number one, allow God's Spirit to give me peace, love, and strength. Allow God's Spirit to give me peace, love, and strength. In the 23rd Psalm, and many of you know these words, the psalmist says, what? Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you art with me, right? We've heard that version of it. Let me read to you the New Living Translation, Psalm 23:4. Even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me. Any of you walking in some dark valleys these days? Any of you concerned about the dark valleys that seem to be right around the corner? What we learn from the psalm is we don't have to live this way. Why? Because you aren't with me. You're with me. God is close to you. If you want him to be, God is close to you. Did you know this, that it's a fact that just being in the presence of someone that you love and someone that you trust actually decreases anxiety? It's true. Research in this area shows this. Children basically have two needs. Number one, they have a need for safety. Someplace, a safe home base, someplace where they're completely safe and they can grow. Number two, they need to explore. But they need to be able to explore from a safe home base so that they can go out and they can learn the skills that they will need to be adults. Now, the two parents that a child may have, one tends to be the parent who's maybe a little more of a safe home base, and one tends to be a little bit of a more parent that will be the explorer, take a risk kind of a parent. Now, we should cross over with that, right? We definitely should. Both parents should. But it's interesting, and we all know how this works out. The other day, we're right in the midst of finishing our basement. All these years, we're finally finishing our basement. And the other day, there was some existing carpet on the steps, so we pulled that up. And it left some staples kind of half hanging out of the steps. And the carpet guys were coming to put the new carpet in a couple of weeks ago. And so the night before, my wife Christina, she grabs my son Brennan, who's 17. She's like, Brennan, you need to go home tonight and you need to pull those staples out. And she looked at me and she said, and you make sure he wears safety glasses. I was like, he's not going to shoot a gun. He's pulling out. She's like, you have no idea where those might be flying and flipping and who knows what's going on over there. The best part, though, is Pastor Jamie was standing there, and he just started busting out. And I thought, man, if the youth pastor thinks it's funny, then I'm safe. I'm okay. She can't get mad at me. I'm fine. He accomplished it safely. No glasses. But what do we need? We need both, right? We need safety and we need exploration. We need a secure base to explore in healthy ways from. Now, here is the harsh, harsh truth, guys. Some of you did not have that growing up. Some of you didn't have a safe or secure home base for you to explore from. And I am so sorry. That was not God's design for you. That's not God's plan for you. But here's the truth, guys. Hear this. God will be your safe base. All of us, if we ask him to. Look at Hebrews 13. Hebrews 13, God has said this. God said, never will I leave you, never will I what? So we say with what? The Lord is my helper, I will not be. What can mere mortals do to me? In your body, when you have fear, something called a fear response activates. Now, you might remember this from high school biology class, right? It's called the sympathetic nervous system. Your heart races, your breathing gets faster, your breathing actually gets shallower, your muscles begin to tense up. Blood actually leaves your brain and goes to your heart. Apparently the heart's more important if you're scared. That's what's happening physically when you have some fear. You know the feeling. And we see that happen in real life, don't we? We see it. We've experienced it. A child who's afraid goes to their comforter, goes to their protector, their parent, so that hopefully then the parent will hold them, love them, encourage them. And then what happens is that there's a whole nother system that takes over. It's called the parasympathetic system. Your heart rate slows down. Your muscles relax. Your breathing deepens. The blood leaves your heart and goes back to your brain so you can think again. And then that moment we realize, I can now go out and face the world again. I can now go out and face the world again. And this is very interesting. Did you know that the Bible addresses this? It actually does. Look at 1 John 4. It's talking about the love of Jesus, the love that Jesus has for every one of us. And it says this, such love has no what? Because what love? Perfect love expels what? All of it. All of it. So it is literally true what's happening physically in our bodies. That invitation comes from God to trust him, to allow his perfect love. Because guys, let's face it, only God can love you perfectly. We were built for human relationships, and we need each other. But guys, only God can love you perfectly. When you run to a parent, it doesn't make the thing you're afraid of go away, does it? When you run to that secure home base, it doesn't make the sharks of this world go away. But what? It reconnects you with a safe base. Why? So that you can get back out in the water again. God is our ultimate Father whose love for us is perfect. When you're anxious, you can't just wish it away. But we can choose instead to take that anxiety and take that to God and allow Him to love us and encourage us with His perfect love so that we can get back in the game. And here's the thing, though. Some people, I see this all the time. They say, well, if I'm afraid of something, if I'm not doing things exactly the way God wants me to do them, then God's probably angry with me. God's impatient with me. Guys, God is not impatient with you. God is not angry with you. God does not stand off to the side and tap His foot. He loves it when His children run to Him. He loves it. When a thought comes, when something pops in and something is wrong, when you're anxious, when that begins to well up within you, we need to run to God. And there's lots of different ways that we can do this. Find what works for you. Maybe it's a short prayer. Maybe it's memorizing the 23rd Psalm. And of course, and you hear me say this so much, the best thing is to be spending that time every day with God. Why? So we can fill our head with knowledge? No. So we're practicing living in the presence of the one who loves us perfectly, so that when those things in life come, we have that home base. We know where to go. You remember this? We talked about it a couple of months ago, about this idea of what we think on, how we decide to think will either spiral us up towards God or down, away from God. What will you do to help you spiral up? And there, again, there's all kinds of different ways to do that. Maybe find another Christ follower, somebody that you trust. Let them know about your struggles. Because when you say it, when you bring it out in the open, it loses power over you in that. It's so important, guys. If anxiety is something you're wrestling with, never stress alone. Do not be a solitary stressor. That is not a good thing. That is a spiral down. When we start to worry, we get anxious, those things begin. We got to disrupt that series. We got to disrupt that thing that's taking us spiraling down. And the Bible talks about this in 2 Corinthians. It says this. It says, we take captive what? Every thought and make it obedient to Christ. Again, are we doing this in perfection? No. What it's saying is when we realize, all right, we're kind of spinning the wrong direction, the anxiety is coming. God didn't give me a spirit of fear. God did not give me a spirit of timidity. Instead, I'm going to give that thought to God. I'm going to let it be captive to Him. And in that, I'm being obedient. Choose to say these words out loud. There's power in the Word. Take these verses home. Put them on your refrigerator. Say them out loud. Those things, there is power in the Word. It will drive out fear. Think about the things in your life. What are the things that spin you towards anxiety? And again, so often it's great to have another Christian friend that you can just simply talk about these things. It just brings them out. Maybe you love music. What music can you listen to that will help you spiral up? Whatever your shark is it your boss? Is it your coworker? Is it your health? Money? In all of these things, it's incredibly important for us to remember this in Ephesians 3. And I pray that you and all of God's holy people will have the power to understand the greatness of Christ's love. How, what? And how that love is. It's perfect. God's perfect love. So high, so deep, so long. Okay, so that's the first part of swimming without anxiety. Allow God's love to permeate your life. Allow His love to create that security in you. Number two, don't let my anxious thoughts cause me to say no to God's calling in my life. Don't let those anxious thoughts cause me to say no to God's calling in my life. Here's the reality. Hearing messages about how God will take care of you is not in itself sufficient, is it? It's not enough. Just hearing information. In order for me to truly, truly open myself up to God's direction, I need to expose my mind to certain thoughts. I need to expose my mind to certain information. Things that will do what? Remind me that God is here, God is able, God knows, and God cares. You know, we can hear something like the 23rd Psalm. Though I walk through this valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. But I also need, what? To engage in some actions. I need to actually trust. Start trusting. Learn what that's like. Actually do it. After I got off active duty and moved back to Colorado, I had gotten my scuba certification, but I'd only done a handful of dives, and a lot of my buddies had already gone to the military and come back, and a lot of them were advanced divers, and they were like, you need to get your advanced certificate. And I said, okay, let's do that. So we went down to a place called Blue Hole in New Mexico. Blue Hole is a really cool place. It's just this giant spring, just a hole in the ground, like 40, 50 feet across, but it's 120 feet deep, and it's perfectly clear. And year-round, it's like 74 degrees or something like that. It's the perfect place, right? Well, the thing was, my buddies all had their advanced cards already, and I didn't. So they were all there just to mess around and make my life miserable, while I was with the dive master who was trying to complete my training. And I'll never forget this because we got to the last day of training, and the last dive was a night dive. So for a night dive, what they do is they actually take a Siloam stick and they tie it to the back of your tank just so that everybody can see where everybody is in case your lights go out. And, you know, just a safety, and then everybody gets lights. And so we all go down, and I was with the dive master, and we get down, and I was about 100 feet, and we're about as deep as you can go. And we're sitting down there. Suddenly, I see my Siloam stick racing towards the surface, and my air stopped working. And then all the lights went out. You see, my buddies had cut the stick, turned off my air, and turned all the lights off. And in that moment, as I was about to have a complete heart attack, I felt my dive master, she reached over and she grabbed my arm, and I went, oh. And she had a spare light, she pulled the light out and turned it on. I was like, okay. And then we looked around, and the funny part is the Blue Hole, it isn't straight on the edges, it's got these serrated kind of like Christmas tree things down the side. I shined the light around, and here are all my buddies, and they're back up underneath these things, and they're all like, looking out. It's good to have good friends. See, and the thing is, guys, is a lot of us, we'll read book after book. Where he'll talk after talk. We'll listen to sermon after sermon. We'll even read the Bible, which is very, very crucial. But then too often, we just completely remain the same anxious, worried, angry, joyless people that we were before. It takes practice. It takes trust. Trust the dive master. Jesus basically said, guys, you're going to have enough trouble in this world. So what I'm asking you to do is place yourself in the Spirit's peace, my peace. Put yourself in that place time and time again, because as you do that, then it becomes more natural and easier for you then to be able to just look at the dive master and go, I'm okay, I'm okay. Yeah, it's dark and there's sharks around, and you know what, but you're with me, and I'm okay. God has a plan for your life. Go and live it out without fear. Number 3, focus less on sharks. Focus less on sharks and probably, I should say, possible sharks, and more on Jesus. You see, we react emotionally to whatever we think about, whatever we focus on. So why not focus on Christ? Why not focus on Him? That He's with you, that He loves you, that He wants to give you strength, that He created you for something more. And then in that process of practicing and understanding and living with Him, and again, not perfect, that He has more for us. When a few years after the whole Blue Hole experience, I was actually working in LA, and my buddy had just finished SEAL training. And so he called me up and he said, hey, come down to graduation. I said, you bet. So I hopped a commuter flight and flew down to San Diego, and we were all down there celebrating his accomplishment, getting through buds. And we were sitting around that night having dinner, and somebody went, hey, I know what we need to do. Let's go do a dive. Okay, that sounds great. So the next day we hired a boat, and we went down into the Mexican waters. There's little islands down there. And can I tell you, when you dive with a bunch of Navy SEALs, you are taking your life in your hands. I just tell you that. But I tell you, we went down there, and the water was a little rough, and we were feeding the fish, and people were barfing and feeding the fish, and we got in there, and it was beautiful. And then people were turning off my air, and I was turning off their air, and it was fine. And I'm okay. I'm okay. Had a great time. Focus on God. Cling to Him. You're worried. You're worried about money, and everything in you says hoard it, hang on to it, obsess over it, and that just riles you up more and more. And what if instead of that we could look at God and say, I'm okay. I'm okay, God. I'm connected to you. And in connection with you, I know you're going to take care of me. And so what do? I practice. God, I'm going to be generous with my money. I'm going to manage it as wisely as I possibly can. I'm going to put this in the trust department, but at the end of the day, God, I'm okay. Or you're worried about what somebody's going to think of you this week because, something happened and you need to talk to them. You need to speak the truth in them with love, but you don't know, you're afraid to do that. And so it's just easier just to put that off into the frustration, tucked it away, worry category. How about instead if we just say, God, okay, God, I'm okay with you. God, help me, go with me. I need to have this conversation. I know you're going to help me do this. I'm going to move this into the trust category. Remember, God is swimming with you. If you're worried about a project at work, how about instead about being worried about that project at work, instead of procrastinating, right? Instead of avoiding, instead of stewing, how about instead you say, God, I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm going to jump into this, and I know that you're with me, and I know you're going to help me. And God, I'm going to do the best that I possibly can, but in the end, God, I know you're going to help me. I'm okay with you. Every time something comes back to your mind, a concern, focus on Him instead of the problem. Talk to Him about it. Here's what I most want to say, and then we'll be done. Guys, you're going to go through this life one time. Once. You know what? Some amazing, wonderful things are going to happen to you. Some of your dreams are going to come true. You know what? Some terrible things are going to happen to you. Some pain, problems, disappointment. You can choose to go through this life with anxiety, or you can go through this life growing in peace in a close relationship with Christ. Life's too short. Joy is too precious. God is too good. Your soul and the condition of your soul matters too much to throw away on another moment of anxiety and strife apart from the Spirit of God. For the Spirit of God has been given to you, and it is not a spirit of fear, and it is not a spirit of timidity. Now, I want to invite you just for a moment, if you would. I want you to think about, what are the sharks in your life? What are the things in this life that create anxiety and worry and stress for you? What are those things? In fact, you know what? Let's just bow our heads for a moment, if you would. Let's just bow our heads. I want you to think about it. What are the things that bring anxiety? What are you afraid of? What is it that makes your heart race with anxiety? Would you just take a moment right now, and I want you to think about this, but I don't want you to beat yourself up. This is not about guilt. Don't feel guilty. Simply what I want you to do is take that worry, whatever it is, and I want you to give it to God. Whatever it is. Whoever that person is. Whatever that situation is. Maybe it's your health. Maybe it's your money. Maybe it's your marriage is in trouble. Maybe it's a concern for what somebody is thinking about you, or a conflict that you're having with someone. Maybe there's an outcome that you desperately want and you're afraid it's not going to happen the way that you desire for it to happen. Maybe you're carrying around some guilt or some regret. Maybe you feel like because you haven't been spiritual enough or good enough or whatever enough that you can't even come to God. And what God is saying to you right now is, I love you so much. I love it when you come to me. Would you right now, would you just put yourself at the feet of God? Would you just unburden your heart? Guys, you've been carrying it long enough. God is saying to so many of you right now, I want you to be free. Lay this burden at my feet. Dear Jesus, God, what a need there is right now in this room for your peace. Lord, surround us with your love. God, we ask to have your Spirit at work right now in our hearts, right now in these moments. God, we ask. And Father, thank you that we are comforted by your presence. Lord, thank you. Thank you that we know that you're with us, that we're not alone. We're not ever alone. And that God, with you, we can handle anything. And then God, help us to remember 85% of the stuff we worry about doesn't ever even really happen. But then God, for that other 15%, give us discernment, give us wisdom, give us grace. But God, most of all, help us to give it to you. Help us to remember, God, we don't have to carry these things by ourselves. We can lay these things at your feet. And right now, God, in our minds, we do that. We lay these things at your feet. And we thank you. We thank you that you never leave us. We thank you that you never forsake us. We thank you that you love us. We thank you that you created us for a life and a purpose. And that no matter what might be going on around us, what sharks are swimming around us, God, you're with us. We're okay with you. We love you, Father. We pray all this in Jesus' name. And all of God's people said, amen.